ABC News.
The Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, says he is open to considering quotas to increase the number of female Liberal MPs. His comments came after one of his most senior female ministers said she'd had a gutful of disrespect and poor treatment of women in Parliament and in other workplaces. Industry Minister Karen Andrews said it was time for the Liberal Party to seriously consider introducing quotas to try and get more women into Parliament. And Mr Morrison says he's not opposed to that idea and does want the party to do better.
Colleagues know well that I'm very open to these questions. I've had some frustrations about trying to get women pre-selected and running for the Liberal Party to come into this place.
Will more women MPs in the federal government fix Parliament's culture problem? Jenny Morris is the founder and chair of Women for Election Australia. The Prime Minister says he's long supported this idea, that he thinks that what they're doing right now isn't working. What's your reaction to his comments?
Look, I think the proof is there in front of us that after many, many, many years of the Liberal Party and our Australian government attempting to get gender balance, we see very little movement. And in fact, if you look at where Australia sits at the moment on the Global Gender Index, we sit at 57th on political empowerment out of 144 countries, and that's worse than it was previously. And of course, it doesn't make sense when we are also on that same scale, number one on educational attainment. So we've got the best educated women in the world and a very poor representation in politics.
Ministers Marise Payne, Karen Andrews and Melissa Price have all backed the calls for the party to now consider a gender quota. Is there more of a groundswell now, given recent events in Parliament? Is this the opportunity to get it done?
Look, if not now, then when? I think that not only are we seeing the parliamentarians come together and support this, there is such a groundswell in the community as well. So I've not, in my, 30 years almost of working, or more than that actually, looking at women and the women's attitudes and the lack of representation both in corporate and in politics, but particularly now in politics, I've never seen such a groundswell across generations, across culture. It's truly extraordinary at the moment.
Not everyone's on board. Not every woman is on board in the Liberal Party. It's a familiar discussion they've had at regular occasions. But Liberal Senator Concetta FierravantiWells says while she welcomes the discussion, she says it will encounter a lot of resistance in New South Wales.
Look, I think it does encounter resistance. I think there's always the argument that's put forward, which is actually a false argument, that women can make those get there on merit. And in fact, if that was the case, we would have a much more equal balance. So we don't have a situation that actually encourages or attracts women. And I mean, we've seen that played out in the last couple of weeks.
What about that argument against it then, that it should be more on merit, that the best candidate should get the job rather than be done on any sort of affirmative action?
And the problem with that is women don't have an opportunity to even be having a voice in that. So the system is very much skewed. The pre-selection system is skewed against women. Then women, there are a number of barriers to women going into politics, and culture, as we've seen played out, is certainly one of them. And in fact, I mean, maybe just to take another perspective on it, currently there are 22 members of federal cabinet, of whom 16 are men. If you turn that round the other way and say, what would cabinet look like and what would Australia look like if there were 16 women sitting in that cabinet and only 6 men? And I would say, would you see that Kate Jenkins report would still be sitting on a desk a year later? Would the safety and welfare of women within Parliament still be being ignored? And would the government response to the COVID situation, the COVID crisis, still be skewed towards the male-dominated apprenticeships? And would there be more attention to domestic violence? Would there be better access to childcare? All of these things feed into legislation and feed into policy. And without women at that table, we're not going to get the sort of legislation, the sort of economy, community, the Australia that we actually want and are very proud to live in.
Suggestions already that many women are reluctant to go into politics at local, state or federal level. Recent events are hardly a good advertisement for the job. Do you fear fewer women will be interested even at our low base right now?
Look, of course, it's a pretty grim picture that we see. But on the other hand, what we see, and Women for Election has done a lot of work on this, is to say, but there is another side to that story, and we interview women, and we have the opportunity to show women actually what an extraordinary privilege it is. And we have women parliamentarians saying that, yes, it was difficult, but it was the best years of my life. So we want to encourage women. We want to get critical mass. We want to equip them through our programs. We want to provide mentoring from women who have walked those paths before. So it's not just a matter of quotas that we need. We need a whole raft of programs and interventions in order to change this. This isn't an easy fix.
And can I just ask quickly how common quotas are here, elsewhere, around the world?
Look, if you look at the countries around the world with the top representation of women, so take those top 10 countries, 9 of those 10 have quotas. If you take the bottom 10, 7 I think of those don't have quotas. So quotas are effective in fast-tracking women into Parliament. Once you've got women in Parliament, you can get culture change.
Jenny Morris, thanks very much for talking to us.
My pleasure, thank you.
Founder and chair of Women for Election Australia, Jenny Morris, saying bring the quotas on and do what you can to get more women in the parliaments all around Australia.